Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Let's begin. Let's begin with our Fatiha. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum again. Those of you who are joining us in the moment, and those of you who will join us later on and watch the recording, and inshallah, with God's permission, you will find some value in it. It will be, it may cause you to think, have some conversations with your loved ones, with being those who you are in community with. And inshallah, as we have these discussions, as today's discussion is set to be, inshallah, interactive. And I know we get a lot of benefit out of listening and kind of taking in what's being said, digesting, and maybe acting or responding to those things later on. But the goal is really for us in this space and time to really try to be intentional about giving voice to to how this discussion sits with us in this particular moment. So inshallah, that will be the case today. We've got a really rudimentary, very basic slideshow, just a few PowerPoint slides to get us to illustrate a few points and to get us thinking about some of the things that were brought up in last week's discussion. And this really is multi-part. You really couldn't even put a name on this because this is something, this idea of community, an idea of labor, right? Because this really initially came out of the observation of the importance of labor and how Allah reminds us that we get nothing but what we work for. And so it ties our achievement to our intention and our willingness to work for those things. And that's as individuals, but certainly, and more importantly, as a community. So this is the space where we're going to engage today in further defining not just how we understand community, but our expectations of community. And we did we did some of that within last week. We kind of mentioned some of the things from an economic standpoint, or we mentioned, the economic, the buying power of the African-American population, of the United States being at about $1.3 trillion, and how, and then to think about how that's directed and how that number, does that number actually, do we see that number represented in our neighborhoods, in our communities, right? And the answer, for the most part, we could honestly say, no, that's not the case. There's a lot of potential, but the potential does not necessarily mean that there's change coming out of that. And it also means that presence, being present does not always mean that there's a participation that goes along with it. So that participation, the intention, that leads to that outcome that Allah speaks to us about in terms of none of us, there's nothing that we get except for what we work for. So I want to start out by first, I'm going to share my screen and hang on a second before I share it. Let me I'm going to share my screen and okay, here it is. Okay, so you can see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Now, this picture, for me, because the question that I'm gonna present, and hopefully get some input, and that'll kind of get our discussion, some of our discussion going, is that when I think about community, one of the things that comes to me is love, right? It's not just activity, but it's love. And it's like to say the family that prays together stays together. The community, likewise, the community that prays together, the community that works together, is joined together in purpose. That's a community that stays together. And I love this particular picture here. And I can't remember who took this picture. I don't know if Sister Kia took this or, but this was one of the days that while we were on break. And I think this is back when we were still breaking up concrete at the new center, the new masjid. And it's, you know, folks are dirty. Matter of fact, I don't know. Okay, no, it's just me in a way. We see our brother Abdul Khalik and Dr. Aisha in particular, both getting their sandwiches in. Everybody else, you know, we caught the picture without. Nobody else has, you know, got it to their mouths at that particular moment. But this particular picture, you know, it reminds me of the importance of a unified commitment, right, to a goal. And so I love this particular picture. And I just thought it was one that's kind of representative of the idea of being committed, not just in word, but in deed. And of course, everybody can't come out at the same time. And this is in no way representative of everyone that put in work or that continues to put in work, you know, in many different areas. But it's a representation, you know, of that commitment. So as I move to this next, okay, so community, because Allah tells us, well, not because Allah tells us, but we understand that our deen, our faith is it is all encompassing, that it leaves nothing out. It's not something that is only relevant for us when we are in the masjid, but it is relevant for us in every facet of our lives. I would like, if we could start, if folks could give us, you know, what are some of the representations of community, you know, or communities that you are a part of, you know, or how do you, no, because I'll answer the question by saying this. How would you define, how do you define community? Are there 5 examples of community or communities that we can, that we can draw on right now? And it will be relevant as we move forward.
So, do you want words thrown out or phrases?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking words, you know, particular communities, efforts that represent community, right? Like I'll just put one out. Within work, there are many different subsets of communities. Within education, there are many different subsets, all right, different subcategories of community, right? So we have a faith community, right? Kind of family.
Okay, what comes to my mind is location, community, like people who live in the same area.
Okay.
I don't know if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's fine. Geographical community. Okay.
Okay.
I would say social.
Okay. So the people we enjoy, you know, they interact with on a, okay. Yeah. Okay. So we got geographic, we got social.
Understanding.
Okay. You say you didn't understand it?
Folks with a common goal or have a common understanding?
Either one.
Yeah,
because you can have ideological communities, you know.
Yeah. We also have something in the chat as well.
Okay, let's see here. Okay, unity, vision, or common purpose. Absolutely. Yeah. And those will certainly define. That's a great way of defining community, right? What a successful community or cohesive community would look like. Thank you, Sister Jalila.
What about economic?
And economic. Okay. So I didn't do this on whiteboard. So we could have wrote those 5 things in and we could keep writing if there are other, or keep naming particular aspects of community or representations of community.
United by something, united by something common. I see those two words in community, common, and I see unity. And it's those united by something that they have in common.
And I think there's love there as well, right?
Yes.
That
Right.
that common goal that unity brings love. So when the times get hard, as they always do in any community, that you lean in on the love.
Mm-hmm. Right. So we have representations in terms of like the sentiments that bind community, or that that you can look at and see community. And then there are also I don't want to say material, but yeah, like the tangible aspects of community. I believe Sister Akima mentioned like the geographic community, right? And then there's the community in practice, or in all of these different, I guess, tendrils that come from it when we say the economics, right? So they're I don't know, I'm not gonna say countless, but there are a number of economic communities, right? When you start to kind of parse that out and see that, you've got just different sectors of the economy. And actually, that's one of the things that we'll see in just a second. So let's keep all of these in mind. Let me move to the next one. All right. So the question here is, what do people need? What do we provide? And this goes back to, I think, everything that was just mentioned, but it asked the question, quite clearly, what do people need? And what do we provide? Communities are often, they are the result of people coming together to address a common need. The economic angle of it, whether it is it's education, housing, any subset that we could think of, is people addressing the common need. So this takes us back to the basic needs, right? We go to food, clothing, and shelter. If we think about those things right there, we have communities that spring up just out of the effort to provide and secure those things for people, not just for the individual, but for, as an elevated creation. Our strength lies in our ability to cooperate, and our ability to pool our resources and to communicate a vision, to see that vision in it and then work towards that, right? The whole idea of a city, right, in and of itself, it's a collective vision that's been bought into. The Cannon family, you got your hand up. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I think that's from before. I never took it down.
All right, no worries. But it's a part of, it's recognizing something that has a benefit. The idea of us grouping our resources together, common defense, and the prosperity, right? Because there's no prosperity if you are constantly in survival mode. If you're constantly warding off, the wild animals, and the fact that we have laws, and and we agree upon the need to have laws, to save us from the lawless, right? So once again, there's no prosperity if you have to worry about your neighbor stealing what you have, right? You trying to build a house and somebody come along and stealing your bricks. So these things, it goes back to what we need, and then it goes into how we're a source of provision. Our collective effort, our unity, the vision, and that common purpose that was mentioned in the chat, and also by brother Clyde. These are the things that come out of our collective work, right? So as a community today, as a community that is a part of that $1.3 trillion, right, that exists, that's funneled that's within the not just the U.S. economy but the global economy now. What are we providing for ourselves, and are our needs being met, as a result of what we know our resources to be? Right, that's a question. Obviously, I think it's probably more rhetorical than anything, but we do have to ask ourselves in the immediate vicinity, right? Because you've all heard the saying that, well, somewhat, I'm about to mess the saying up, but it basically is saying that all it puts the emphasis and the importance on the importance of local politics, right? The local needs, the local relationships, local resources, and so on. So that's the first part of that question. So what do people need and what do we provide? And I want to give some space right now for folks to jump in and tackle that question as however it hits you. And I'll remind you, this is for us as a faith community, right? As a faith community who understands that our way of life is holistic, it's all encompassing, is intended to be that way. So, so what do we see as the needs being, and what are we providing?
One thing I think, only speak from personal, right? I think what I need is a space where all segments of our community, our young folks, feel like they have a voice, especially because without that, we don't continue to exist. So I need it to be a space where our teenagers, our preteens, our toddlers, our just about to be 30s, all, and our pioneers all have a space that they feel like they belong and they can contribute to.
Something I'm thinking about now, just as an immediate need, only because I'm cooking while I am listening to the conversation. What comes to my mind is food. Just as a Muslim, like part of the larger Muslim community, and living in a predominantly, obviously, Christian society, when I need foods that meet our particular needs as Muslims, how I have to travel outside of my community or my immediate area to get those things. So if I'm thinking about as a member of the Taqwa community, the halal foods and things that I wouldn't have to go outside of our immediate community to get.
Okay, thank you.
So
In
addition to that, what the sister just said, food, yes, and then also like cultural needs. Those things that we replace our culture, like our entertainment, our education, culture. So all of those different needs that we have as human beings, as people, that are able to, something that can halal those things, so for that to be provided, or a space for that to be provided in.
Thank you for that, Imam Zaki. I'm going to press you just a little bit. Can you expound just a little bit? Because I know, we kind of use this phrase often, but when you say to halal those things, just expound on that a little bit. And I think it would be beneficial, especially for those who might come behind and look at this later on after the fact.
Yes, well, an example is like music. Everybody enjoys music, but some music is not halal, meaning that it is talking of things that are almost anti-Islamic. But for us to be able to consume the music, to have music that is provided that will uplift us and point us in the direction of God, where we can still, vibe to. Is that good?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that.
It's probably no surprise to anybody that I'm going to say education, but I think I'll try to surprise you in the way that I explain what I'm talking about. I think we need to move toward an understanding that all of us are in a position to facilitate our young people. In fact, all people at every stage of the life cycle, we're in a position to facilitate them getting the education that they need, getting the information that they need. Education is a lifelong journey. It's not something that only happens inside of what we call a schoolhouse. And we don't have to have a schoolhouse to play a role in helping people make sure that their children and themselves get education that's useful, that meets their needs. You know, we can facilitate that information. We can direct traffic. There's a major need for that traffic direction. You know, we can offer information on how they interface with the system that they have to participate in, because we don't have an alternative for them now. We don't have to do nothing until we get that alternative, because that's what other communities do. You don't find all Jewish kids going to Hebrew. They may go to Hebrew school after school, but they don't go to schools that are committed or philosophically bound to teach their way of life. And I think we can do a whole lot more of that kind of thing as we get in a position to do what we may think of as a quote unquote school physically, you know, even a college physically. We can be advisors and traffic directors. And there's a really tremendous need for that. I think the need for that is missed because people don't know how to conveniently label it. But that's how we're losing a lot of people.
Okay. Thank you for that, Brother Clyde. That definitely that goes right into I believe the previous comment. I want to read a comment from the chat, then I'm gonna turn it over, ask Sister Amy L to go ahead and take the mic. I see her hand up. And I'm reading a comment for those who have not seen in the chat. This is from my brother Vale. He says, a space where we feel like we belong there. As a person who is the only Muslim in the family, there's definitely a need to feel like you belong in a community that loves and supports your beliefs. Tremendously important, along with this idea of education and its connection to culture. Sister Amy.
Hey, so
Like my son.
I think to go along with what Brother Clyde just said, the education piece, mentorship. I think, you know, after you get the education, or even before you get the education, how do you go about getting into that realm, school or whatever it is? And then after you receive this education, what do you do with it? And then mentorship for just other life happening things as well. So I think that's another really, 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 really big part. No matter the age of the individual, we all need mentorship.
Great point. Great point. I think that also speaks to because mentorship in itself is a representation of its communication and cooperation, right? It's recognizing that someone has a resource that can benefit you, and then also on the other way around, that I have a resource, I have something that's of benefit to someone else. And then the mentor-mentee relationship in particular, it's one where both individuals benefit. I'd like to quickly connect that to the previous two comments from Brother Clyde and Imam Zaki. Education and culture, right? Isn't one of the challenges that we face is to produce a culture of education, a culture of cooperation, where both of these things are. These are just the norm, because we have kind of going back to that first picture, the first slide, where we have, you know, put in the consistent work. It just becomes a part of who we are. How do we do that in those spaces? While we and feel free, we don't feel like this is a linear conversation. If there's something that has struck you from, you know, a question or a comment before, you know, we can always go back. This is I guess cyclical, or, you know, just organic. But as I mentioned from Sister Amy L's point about the mentorship, and it, you know, we kind of look at some of the problems we have. All successful people, and thus by extension, all successful communities, they address problems, right? So we have to, you know, it's important for us to ask ourselves, what are the problems? What problems do we solve?
I don't want to talk too much, but I got you're making me talk a little bit more than I plan to.
That's good.
But I really I laughed when you mentioned culture, because it made me feel the same way. A few things that Brother Rabani said in his khutbah make me feel. You know, I was telling him afterwards, I said, you know, sometimes I'm listening to all of you who imams who give these khutbahs, particularly from our community, but from other communities too. I listen to you and I'm saying like, wow, I got to be disciplined. But I'm sitting here thinking like, now I know where sometimes our folks used to shout in church, because some things are so powerfully on point. That's almost the only way you could really express it. But you know, but we discipline people, so we try to use words now. We don't shout anymore, but we really use words.
Yeah.
But I think the most fundamental, almost the thing tying everything we're saying together is culture. And I don't know if any of you've read it, Brother Shahid, Sister Layla's husband. He's got a book out, and it's over here. I don't want to move away from right now and give you the title of it. But the central thesis of his book is about how our positive culture is always under attack. And he's giving the example from the perspective of African-American culture, wholesome African-American culture.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Wholesome African-American culture is Islamic. The unwholesome African-American culture, which of course is what they push on us, that's un-Islamic. Now, there are certainly some things we can do to strengthen that healthy culture that we have, because they're stealing it and they give it back to us. They reappropriate it, give it back to us, poison it, give it back to us. But this is the unifying glue that has tied us together and has gotten us through this 400-year journey. And this is why we came to Al-Islam, because we already had in us those principles that we may not have been able to articulate. They were part of our culture already, our positive culture. You know, they may have given us a white God, but they didn't destroy our commitment to faith and living by faith and being driven by faith and being driven by some kind of unifying principle of faith. And it's expressed in every aspect of our lives. And I think anything that we do should certainly, and I don't know who talked about halal first. I believe it was Sister Angela. Halal our culture, you know. We don't have to destroy everything that's us. We have to halal some of it. Some of it's never was us, somebody imposed it on us. But that glue there's so much wealth we have in our culture that everybody else is making zillions of dollars on. And we need to bring that into anything that we do. We should never expel that. You know, when Imam Muhammad had us doing curriculum for the school, he was very, very, very watchful of the fact that we did not dismiss our achievements, our strengths as African Americans, including the journey of the Nation of Islam and other parts of our journey. So I think culture is the destruction of our culture is a problem. The building and nourishing of it is something that we need to do. And I think some of those activities that I think it was Sister Aisha was talking about we needed to have at the mass. All those things are culture, and it gives people a reason to be connected. And that's virtually and physically, because people are virtual now. We can't think just in terms of physical, because people are virtual.
Yeah.
And if we don't get to them, somebody else is definitely going to. They're not going to do nothing.
Great point. Great points. Keep them coming. Anybody else have a comment?
If I could pull on that and kind of concretize it as what do we do as next steps as the community that we're in right now? right? Because I think I love you all. We'll get together and solve the world, right? But then go back to doing the same small things that we like, not paying attention to those same small things that we need to pay attention to, right? And so, like, could we come up with, and again, starting small, could we come up with a music list that we put on our website and we put in our newsletter that has, to promote halal artists, right? That are doing music that speaks to our hearts, right? So that there is an alternative, right? I think, growing up, it was what you can't do, and what you don't do, instead of here's what you can, right? And giving the alternative and giving something else and not focusing on what you can't do, right? And so, like, could we cobble together, and I would be willing to start a Google form that people could put the music that they listen to that is, that is halal already, so that we have a list that we could pass on and we could keep adding to. That's one way to kind of concretely, where do we start? Because those are the kind of things that change. It changes communities when we continue to do those small things consistently. So that's my small addition.
Thank you, Dr. Aisha. And I think that's, and I'm trying to pause a little bit because I don't want myself to get on a roll. So I'm going to try to talk in spurts a little bit because I want this to be, really, participatory. But that's a brilliant point. And Brother Clyde, that was Imam Zaki who had mentioned that point about halaling the, those elements, right? Yeah. But but to Dr. Aisha's point, as far as like, we don't have a radio station, but we have technology now. We have the ability to leverage the technology that we have, where, I do YouTube music. I got Spotify. I don't really use Spotify. I use, YouTube music. So I got playlists, and many of us have different platforms, whatever our platform of choice is, but you have the ability to make a playlist and make that a public playlist, or to share it with folks, share it with just a limited number of folks based on just, I'm gonna share the link. So whoever has the link is able to, to listen to it. But that means that there is an opportunity to curate music that's, because we want that. That's a part of, who we are. There's an opportunity to have this, multiple, just something as simple as a playlist. I want to listen to upbeat music. I want to listen to something that's uplifting, that makes me want to move a little bit. But I don't want to take in all of the other stuff that just tries to undo that connection with Allah, that tries to debase me and, push me off into something else. So that's something, just it's something that comes to mind, just really actionable. Just, we got a group of folks that say, okay, we're going to take on creating a playlist and share them.
Actually, I like your idea even better. That's a better idea. I borrow public playlists all the time, including gospel music, that people make public on YouTube. And so I don't have to go and try to find which ones are good and run into that, because they name them. And so I think that's even better, because not only do we have something that we provide in our community, but we're providing folks outside of our community, because we know what we have, inshallah, is a gift to the world. So I like that idea.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. As it relates to culture, something that we've been doing, something led by Sister Zakia, and we've got folks around the country who are doing other things, but we know right here that Sister Zakia has a long history in the theater arts and empowering our young and our young at heart through our productions. And it was just up until pre-pandemic, I think maybe a year before the pandemic, I think was the last time we had a live performance, where we did it at the Chicago State's Breaky Theater. But once again, cultural expression, theater, being able to present, to infuse theatrical performances with our ethics, with Islamic, with morality and spirituality. That's not a small thing. That's a huge thing. One of the problems, I guess, that we could look at would be that only those folks that were in attendance had the opportunity to see that. And of course, the doors are wide open for further cultural contributions of that sort that we could be mindful of and think along those lines. I see Dr. Aisha's hand is up. Or was that not you?
So, yeah, can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, so I'm gonna just make this comment, then I'm gonna leave space on the floor to make sure we have equity of voice. But what I wanted to also add to is kind of bouncing off of both Zaki and Hakima and Clyde's comment. So, alhamdulillah, I was able to get a Muslim chaplain at UIC for the first time in its history. We have at least, there's a huge population of Muslims at UIC, and every other faith community had a chaplain and has had a chaplain. And so getting the resources was a problem at the public university. The institution has not hired any of these chaplains. And so it was up to the Muslim community to hire this. But so alhamdulillah, we had that. But like Brother Clyde was saying, that actually changing the spaces that we're in before we have our own spaces, right? Or if we're not in those spaces. So like parents have a voice. Alumni have a voice. So how are we using those voices to say, hey, this is something that our children need. This is something that we want to have. You go out to some public schools in different communities and they have Eid off. They have. So how are we using our voices in the spaces we are to carve out room for our faith to be fully, actualized?
Alhamdulillah. So feel free to keep that thought in mind. I want to kind of move on because there's only like two other ones. All right, what do we see here?
Sorry. A home.
A home. Yes. Now I wanted to. Yep. So this is actually a senior housing facility, but it's representative of housing in general. And we think about the things that we need. This is always going to be the top three, food, clothing, and shelter. But as it relates to as a community concern, the housing of our vulnerable populations, right? Our seniors, our elderly, the infirm, and also on the other end, we think about orphans, right? The Quran continuously in multiple spaces, it references the orphan for multiple reasons directly related to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and others. But housing as a collective commitment, the effort that we engaged in right now, that first picture, and we got a bunch of other pictures, and many other conversations that we've had where we've talked about how we have donated and put our time in and our money in to get to the point that we are right now in our current facility. The extension of that is also recognizing a problem in terms of housing for our seniors. That's identifying the problem, but it's certainly not saying how to address it, right? That's a community concern, but I feel like that's something that should be on our radar as we move forward. And I'm gonna pause right there. And how does that resonate How does that resonate with you all? I mean, there are multiple levels to that housing. iPhones, hand is raised. You've got the floor. Whoever's listed as iPhone.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam. Oh, Sister Gloria. Dr. Gloria, go ahead.
Yes, yes. I'm listening to, and I've been, in full disclosure here, grocery shopping and all kinds of stuff with Taleem. So I've been a little in and out, but I'm hearing you talk about, how to really support community for our aged, our pioneers, our infirm, right? And I find that to be probably one of our greatest challenges, quite frankly, because not that we have everything worked out for our youth or for our young adults or any of that, but they've still got time, right? But for our aged, our pioneers, our infirm, their time is coming to an end. And it would be really advantageous to them and for us as community grow, to grow our community, right? To find ways to shore up their needs. In other words, building community around them. Unfortunately, we have had several brothers and pioneer brothers and sisters who were in facilities and who passed away, and their needs were not being met as Muslim. They were subject to whatever the meals were, whatever practices were, prevalent in that facility. And so being able to support them in a better way, and just knowing that with many of our pioneers, especially some of them who may have been the only Muslims in their families, or if all other family members have passed on and they really don't have anyone or very, 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 very little support around them, as far as family is concerned, I think that, we have to, build community around them. How to do that is a monumental, task, of course. And I know that we do have some brothers and sisters in our community who have taken that on to try to support our pioneers, but we need more. We need to do more. And because their needs are, can be really quite extensive. When you're talking not just diet, not just lifestyle, not just practices, but maybe they have vision issues and can't read Quran. Maybe they have hearing issues and can't hear Quran, right? Maybe they have mobility issues, or maybe they have all three. How do we build community around them? So, that's my question.
Thank you for that, Dr. Gloria. And I want to lift up, well, two things. Number one, I stopped sharing the PowerPoint because I think where I was in danger of probably having us drink out of a fire hose, instead of a glass. And by that I mean the challenges. We understand the challenges that we have are, there are many. But sometimes in articulating those challenges, what can happen is, you can almost get, I don't want to say defeated, but we can get lost in just articulating the challenges. So I want to do two things. The first is I want to point to a previous comment that was made by Dr. Aisha with regard to um, saying, you know, I'll step up and work with, you know, anybody, you know, we have a committee of 2, committee of 3, whoever, that wants to work with regard to the culture and the impact of, you know, just putting together playlists, right? That we can benefit from, and those outside of our community as well can benefit from. That's the first thing I want to lift it up. And the second I want to lift up to the point that Dr. Gloria just made, right? We have a health and wellness committee, you know, at Masjid Al-Taqwa, but the challenge remains in how to mobilize the resources that we have to address the enormity of the problem, of the challenge. And I think that because we have a venue, I think once again there's opportunity for those who want to join that committee, join that effort, and to go back once again to a comment that was made, put up the first 2 or 3 things that are the most important, the most pressing things that we can work with, right? So if it's a committee of 3 or 4 folks, all right, we're going to take on these two things. These are the 2 things that we're going to work with, because we have the capacity to do those things without being burnt out. And inshallah, as we have more folks join, then our capacity increases. But just creating that culture of cooperation, that the culture of working together, that spills over into everything else. It makes everything else possible, just being willing to work together. And Dr. Ramadan, yeah, I'm glad it was just Dr. Aisha just put it in the chat that Dr. Ramadan, he leads the Health and Wellness Committee. So I believe everyone has his contact information. If you don't, you know, put a message up, and you know, but yeah, so we have avenues for success, but we don't always recognize them as we talk about, you know, what the problems are. But as a masjid, I was saying that as one of our long-term goals, and now I mean long-term as in 10 years from now, but long-term goals should be, as we establish geographic community, is to address housing in every facet as one of our contributions to addressing the problems that we have, that we see in our community. I've went on. Any comments, even if it's related to something that was said earlier or something that has not been said? We love to, because this is an ongoing conversation, but hopefully we get some solutions, different ideas, and increase our energy as we have these conversations. But you know, this is certainly not the end all be all of this. This is a constant effort. So any other comments? All right. Looking for hands. I see no hands.
I have one.
Yeah.
Giving people some things, but I have an idea, and I think I floated it to you, and we'll probably talk to somebody else about it as well. But the idea of pooling our resources more. I grew up in a time where we used to go to McCormick Place and we would see the enormity of Muslims, right? And like, wow, it was one of those, wow. And so how about, and I know we sister with the Baha Center, but how about more of some national sister, brother masjid, where we connect these things, right? So we connect, you know, our youth, and they, you know, get some funding and have the bus that goes to that space, right? So if we connect with the masjid in Atlanta or the masjid in Washington, D.C., and their youth get together and they figure out what makes sense for that weekend, and they plan a weekend together. It's like to grow and pool the resources that we have, not just in Chicago, but with other parts of Ward Dean Muhammad's community and other spaces as well. And how will that look if we are doing that with marriages and families and seniors and youth? So I think that may be something that we can look into, how to intentionally connect with other masjids beyond us and make those trips to do activities that bind and join us.
That sounds amazing. That sounds like an excellent idea.
Yeah, I love that idea as well. That's a wonderful idea. And because part of when I mentioned culture, one of the things that really popped up in my mind is what is our practice? What kind of engagement that we do in order to get married? That's a big problem in our community. But if we're reaching out, like you said, we have a small pot over here, another small pot over there. If we're making those connections, we become larger and have so many more resources, which we really do. I love that idea, Sister Dr. Aisha. I'd be willing to sit and participate in that as well.
So will I, and I'd like to even add possibly, and that is, why not even offer as part of our partnerships, once we can establish that, even doing workshops, with our new partner masjid, our new sister masjid, doing workshops. And, as I said, I was kind of in and out because I've been shopping in and out of the car and all of that. So I've missed some of the conversation. But at one point I thought I heard, looking at suggestions for, things that we can, kind of include with our Taleems, and even doing, marriage workshops for, young people who are looking to marry, and marriage workshops for us, who've been around for a while and been married for a while, because there's so much that can be, so much knowledge to be imparted. So I agree, and hopefully we can look at those other things as well.
I think that's a great idea. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add, and forgive me if these are already in place, but just thinking about, I look back at the times when, when I was younger and the community, we had the co-op. My aunt and, my mom used to work at the foundation, the Claire Muhammad Foundation, where people could come into the thrift store and they could purchase things for low cost. We had housing, as you mentioned, that could be provided for Muslims at a reasonable cost. And as the economy right now, we know inflation is very high, things are very costly, meat's costly, anything that's coming from an animal, dairy, all of those things are very costly. How can we pull our resources together to provide those basic needs for individuals at a reasonable cost, such as, the co-op type environment? And then I also think about what you said. I love the idea of the marriage ministry, not only for those that are newly or approaching marriage, but for those who are already in current marriages. Another idea is in some of the Arabic and Islamic studies, we have probably some Muslims that may not be ready to join. Do we have beginner classes? Do we have intermediate classes? Do we have advanced classes? So that everyone can have access to entry into those spaces without feeling intimidated. So just some ideas. And again, I'm happy to work on any of those to assist as well. I think action is important. Putting the ideas to paper and coming up with a plan and then executing the plan. Thank you.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you.
One of the things I would
Who
like
was
to...
that? I'm sorry, before you go on, was that our sister Jalila?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes,
thank you so much for that.
I think it was Dr. Aisha that introduced the idea of young people going to other masjids, etc.
Mm-hmm.
You can leverage technology so that they get more out of those visits, because you can have them visiting virtually before they visit physically.
Yes.
They can have online connections before they actually physically go to these places. So they really meet. And I'm surprised at people that I meet. Like last night, I met some people on the board at Iman, and they were saying, "No, this is the first time I've seen you." I said, "No, it's not. I've seen you before. And the truth was, I'd seen them virtually, and I was feeling like, I know we met before. No, I've seen. What do you mean? I've seen you. And then I said, you know what, you're right, because I didn't know you were taller than me.
Right.
Little things like that, you know, but you already have this relationship. I think our young people are much more agile with that than we are, because they living in virtual worlds anyway. You know, some of them that we would really probably like to keep a closer eye on. So, you know, I think that could really kind of even maybe add to the original suggestion about the young people, you know, going to the other masjids. They can actually form some relationships through whatever activities they having at that masjid, if they're having some of the same activities we're having, so that when they actually physically get around one, they don't have to spend so much time adjusting to, you know, just to, we've been adolescents before. You know, it's a funny stage of life, and even younger kids are better at it than adolescents. Adolescents are interesting, so you can actually start that before they actually physically are around each other. You can start these relationships, and that makes community. Community is the feeling of a sense of connection to somebody. It's not just being able to reach out and touch them physically.
Absolutely, absolutely. I want to thank everyone, and I want to just kind of go out on this note. You know, during providing marital counseling and premarital counseling, and going over the marriage contract, you know, it brings me up. It brings into focus the idea that just as when I sit down and with a prospective couple, you know, looking to be married, and we're talking about what a marriage contract what constitutes a marriage contract, there's an idea of expectation, and this also goes for community, right? There should be a clearly understood like, what are the expectations of community, my relationship with, my responsibilities in community. So this goes back to this goes back to the marriage contract, and the marriage workshops, and inshallah, these are definitely things that we want to move forward with. I think this has been really productive. We've noted everybody's name. Her sister Dr. Aisha mentioned, you know, she's worked with anybody with the playlist. Dr. Ramadan is with the leading the health and wellness. So anybody who is interested in particularly in that work for our seniors and infirm and such, Sister Jalila, she mentioned that she's willing to do some work with the marriage related, and anybody who is looking to work in any of those areas or other areas, let's share that so we can share sharing that labor, right? Sharing that work and sharing what comes out of that, inshallah. So we are a few minutes past. We remind everybody that all of our Taleems can be found on our YouTube channel. So please share that with others. We want to get the subscriptions up, and inshallah have a positive influence on adding to and edifying and, you know, elevating the culture for Muslims and for humanity, inshallah. So let's close with Surah Al-Asr. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal asr innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati wa tawassaw bil haqqi wa tawassaw bis sabr. Amen.
Amen.